Good afternoon. I'm here to talk about a paradox. And the paradox is this: digital is very important, but digital marketers and their agencies in companies often aren't. And why? To get the influence you need to be successful, you can use the powers of relevance and hope. That's the deal. But before I do, I have to talk about this. Do you know what this is? Have you seen this? This is a dongle dangler. And a dongle dangler is a solution for a problem that should not exist. Because if you buy a new MacBook and you buy a new iPhone and you go home and you try to connect that new iPhone to that new MacBook, you can't. Because the Apple MacBook department has changed all the connectors to USB-C, and the Apple iPhone department couldn't care less and did nothing, so you can't connect them. So what happens is that people like me now have to carry adapters, or as we call them, dongles. I actually sometimes wonder if Apple should consider a new logo, given that everybody is now running around with these little machines. Now here's the thing, because people keep losing these dongles, like me, someone has come up with the dongle dangler. So you can clip your dongles to it, to your keychain, and you won't lose it anymore. Every dongle dangler in this world is just one too many. And what we learn from this is that to make a great customer experience happen, it's not so much about how good your ideas are and how good your tools are and your software is and your technology. It's about whether people like you find ways to remove what's in the way of a great customer experience in your company. And in fact, it doesn't matter to me if you work in an agency or if you work in an industry. No matter where you work, removing those barriers is your asset in the 21st century as a leader. Now, we're seeing a big change in how companies are operating, and I call it the rise of the horizontal organization. There was a time when organizations looked like this. Right? You had design, someone made a product, someone produced it, someone did a marketing campaign, someone sold it, and then someone took after the service. And people were worrying about questions like, what's a compelling product? How can we make this faster? How can we find more customers? And that organization type has informed almost my entire business life. And then the internet happened. And now the big questions in companies look like this. Where do people return orders? How can we convert leads, across the entire channels? How can we create that amazing customer experience across all the touch points? Now, in a horizontal organization, what's more important? Expertise or influence? What's more important? I come back to the answer in a minute. The problem is, too often we are not even asking the question. And it's very easy to get lost in today's digital marketing world, because if you start out in digital marketing and you move to a big city, you move to New York or Singapore or Copenhagen, and you put in the long hours and you're getting 500 emails a day, and everywhere you look, you read how great Steve Jobs was. And if anybody asks your parents what you're actually doing, they have no clue, they can't explain it. In this world, success is a must. And then when people are delaying your projects, and when they are cutting your budgets, and when your clients are slow and they're not implementing the great ideas you have, you get angry. And you say to yourself, I just got to work harder and harder and harder to become more influential. Well, the truth is, it's the other way around. You have to learn how to become influential so all your hard work pays actually off. Now let me prove this to you. We've written a book. The book is called The 12 Powers of a Marketing Leader. It's indeed the first leadership book for people like you. And to get this right, we have indeed conducted the largest ever study on what customer leaders successful, including over 1,200 chief marketing officers, digital officers, from over 80 countries and a total of over 68,000 assessments. Now, what is it that makes people successful, and successful in terms of market impact? What is it? Is it the industry, B2B versus B2C? No, it's not. It's under 1%, just a little bubble on that chart. How about gender? It's a good time to talk about gender, isn't it? So how important is gender for your success? Is it important or not? Does it matter? Well, the good news is it's under 1%. It's actually small. So when it comes to screwing up in digital marketing, we have total gender equality. No difference. How about your personality? How you're wired? Introvert, extrovert? How important are these things? Surprisingly, under 5%. So that's bad news. You can't blame your parents. It's all on you. How about technical skills, like the technical marketing skills we are reading about in books and blogs and everywhere, stuff we're learning at university? How important is it for success? Well, it's about 15%, 1.5. Does that mean it doesn't matter? No, it just means everybody has them, right? It's not special to have marketing skills. If you sit in this room, it's the norm, right? How about your company? So your boss, the incentive systems, the colleagues, the budgets, and all these things. 25%, finally someone we can blame. If you work in a shitty place, it's really hard to be extremely successful. But far and away, the largest factor for success of customer leaders were change leadership skills. The people that did best in our research weren't just great experts at marketing or at digital. They knew how to make change happen. They knew how to remove the barriers to change and create actually things and make the idea happen in organizations. Or in other words, great digital leaders are great change leaders. So I got tips for you. There are many books, many tips in the 12 Powers book, but I picked up a few for you, and I want to talk about the first big area, which is relevance. If you want any influence in an organization, you have to be relevant. Unfortunately, many very senior leaders do not trust digital marketers, or their agencies for that matter, because when they think about the digital department, now they see a VP of cool stuff, a head of fancy campaigns, a chief budget burner, VP of overpromise, and they're all working with this amazing agency that's called Who Cares, It's Cool. And if you're really honest, I mean, you guys are hard to trust, right? Because just think about the work you did in the last week. How much of this work was about the future? How much of this work was about the future? Future revenue, future profit, future customers. How much? Like 50% or 60, 70? Digital marketing in most organizations is almost entirely about the future. And what do you think when someone comes to you and says, I know the future? You think you're mad, right? That's exactly the problem. So that's why when you stand next to someone from finance who has the old numbers, right, everything you will ever say will sound just a little bit less reliable. Because it is. And if you're really, really good, what you become is your firm's most trusted fortune teller. So what do? How do we close the trust gap if we work in an organization or if we work in an agency that tries to close the trust gap? Tip number one, tackle big issues. As a marketer, as a digital expert, as an agency, make sure the issues you're tackling are big. Let me explain. The reason that a company called One-to-One brought to market the world's most successful mobile product ever, which is prepaid or pay-as-you-go, was not that the idea was great and they had it. Actually, the idea has been around. The reason was that a young marketer in that organization named D. Dutta convinced the management of One-to-One, now T-Mobile, of two things. He convinced them that A, people want prepaid phones. They're happy to pay before so they can finally get a phone, which at that time was not so easy for people. But he also convinced the company that this would make a lot of money. And he actually did a real business plan. He did the numbers with finance, and He worked with the engineers to prove that it's actually possible to do it in the systems, which before nobody believed. D worked in what we call the V zone, or the value creation zone, and that is your zone of power. So if you work in an organization, if you work as an agency, the question is always, is your work in the value creation zone? And if not, how can you get it in there? And ideally, how can you even expand that value creation zone, right, so it gets bigger? It's tip one. Tip number two, side with the revenue camp. If you want influence in an organization, you'd better be associated with profitable revenue. Unfortunately, many digital marketers, many agencies aren't. This is a chart that a digital marketer and a chief marketing officer has shown at a top management meeting. These are the marketing priorities 2016. And as you can see, the number one priority is a segmentation review, adding the millennial dimension. And yes, there is a typo. Scaling up programmatic across all platforms. And I cite the CEO, whatever the fuck that means. Launching the next phase of brand, and so on and so on and so on. When people outside of digital, when people outside of marketing reading presentations like these, they're losing their will to live. Because why would they care? Right? These are technical details. So let's do a little bit of target group research. What is on the mind of a typical CEO, CEO next door? What are they thinking about when they're waking up at night? They're talking about revenue, right? They're thinking a lot about cost, and then they think about strategy and organization. What if you as a marketer, what if you as a digital expert, what if you as an agency, what if you are not revenue? What are you then? You're then cost. And what do you do with cost? You reduce it. That's exactly the issue. So how do you get into the revenue camp? Number one, do your numbers. Everything you do, every digital project you have should have a number. You know, show them the money. You can never do this exactly, but you can estimate it. And if you can't, get in bed with the devil. Work with finance. Don't prove your numbers to finance. They're better at this. Yeah, have them do it, right? Get them on board and do the numbers together. It's so easy for them to challenge you. It's much harder for them to come on board and help you, but it's way more effective. And secondly, in all non-marketing, non-digital meetings, we don't talk about attribution, segmentation, millennials. We talk about revenue, customers, and profit. Is actually damn easy, and it works. Now, then there are still your colleagues, all the people that do not work in your department. And here, hope is the biggest power you have. Here's the challenge. As an agency, as a marketer, as a digital expert, you always have this massive power gap when it comes to your colleagues, right? Because you're wrestling with the rest of the organization, and it's quite big. Now just imagine, right, your organization or your client would have the best possible customer experience, like 5-star. How many people in the organization will have to join in to make that happen? Right? How many? I mean, many, right? It's almost everybody. And how many of those people report to you or say directly to your client? Typically very few. And these people can simply ignore you. Let's do a little test. What's the opposite of a delighted customer? You're all experts. What's the opposite of a delighted customer? It's a United Airlines customer. What does this tell us, right? It's not what marketing does or what digital does. People in the organization do their own things and they have their own agenda. They can simply ignore you. So that's why a few of the tips come in. Tip number one, hit the head and the heart. Getting your colleagues to change, getting the colleagues of your clients to change is really hard work. But if you just walk into the silo next door and pull up a PowerPoint and says, well, yeah, we've just spoken with Google or with Salesforce or with Adobe, and they just told us, you know, we need to install this software, this is what it costs, this is how much budget I want from you. We roughly changed a little bit the way we are working together, and by the way, I need to shift some people, also some of yours. The moment you leave the room, lots of these colleagues will just hope you get sucked into a big black hole because it's not their agenda, right? You can't prove anything to your colleagues. You can't prove anything to your clients' colleagues if they're not listening. But you can tell them a story. You can tell them a story that captures their heart, a story that gets under their skin, and a story that gives them hope. In fact, as a leader, you are a dealer in hope. That's what Napoleon said, and he is absolutely right. Not long ago, I met this gentleman. This is Jim Farley. And Jim Farley is the chief marketing officer, the former CMO of Ford. And he was behind the substantial revival of the Ford brand after they've basically gone almost bankrupt. At that time, nobody wanted to spend anything on marketing. Now, he told me I didn't run around with a presentation to say marketing matters, or we have to do these and these tools. He said, and I'm not using his exact words, he said, you know, look, the blue Ford Oval has been a symbol of pride for our customers. Look at the newspaper, what people are writing about us. What we have to do is bring that pride back. And that's when people will come back and buy our cars. That was his story. So for your most important project, for your client's most important project, what is the story of hope that you keep telling in the organization that gets people energized, that gets people to follow you? Okay, one more. Walk the halls. Changing people is a contact sport. So if you want to drive change, you can't do it by email. It's hopeless. What you have to do is you have to leave your office, pack your bags, and talk to all the species in your organization to find out what's actually happening. This is Ed Smith, and Ed is not a former Abercrombie model, as the picture would suggest. In fact, he is a chief marketing officer who's done the unthinkable. Because not long ago, he installed one of the first and most successful paywalls in front of a large magazine. That was in Australia. It's an Australian business, the largest Australian business magazine creatively is called The Australian. And the challenge was, of course, that they were losing money, like many print magazines. People were going online. So he installed a paywall. But he did it in a really smart way. Because what do journalists say if you come and suggest a paywall in front of the lovely content they're writing? They're hating you because they want the stuff to be read. So huge pushback. So Ed was quite smart. He went out, and the first thing he did is he told his story. And he didn't say, we need a paywall. He said, I'm here to help save quality journalism. Ooh, that was a very strong story he had. And then he did the hardest thing known to marketers, the hardest thing known to agencies around the globe, which is shut up and listen. And he listened to what people had to say. He took the concerns, he wrote everything up, and only then did he go home, made a proposal, the management decided to do the paywall in a certain way, many of the ideas taken on board. Now, many people would now celebrate and stop, and he didn't. He did something that was extremely smart. He went back and explained to all the people what happened, how their ideas had been taken on board, what couldn't be done, and why he believes the decision is great. And that has given people a lot of hope. So Ed didn't just walk the halls, he walked the halls and gave people hope. So the question again to you, how could you walk the halls?
This is the second attempt the East Germans made a break in. We could get an important point of the race here.
Viel Glück und viel Segen.
Can they outsprint each other? Which one is the master?
If you want to run and people put barriers in your way, knowing how to run is just not good enough. You need to find ways to remove the barriers. And in the same way with all your work, to make your ideas happen, if people put barriers in your way, you have to learn to remove them. Adidas didn't do this commercial. It was, in fact, a young director, and his name is Eugen Meyer. And Adidas actually didn't want his work. But when he put it online, within 3 months, over 13 million people did. Not giving up, that is what change leaders do. So let me end with a final thought. When I came here and I looked at the room, I was convinced that you all together in this room, with the knowledge, with the power you have, you can actually change the customer experience and what your clients get in your company, for your clients, and actually in the country. But to do this, I believe you have to be ready to scrap your job description and to do what's right. Or to say it with George Adair, all you ever wanted is on the other side of fear. Thank you.